AARP. My next guest supported a budget resolution to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but has also raised questions about the proposal to replace it. He joins me now. He's New York Congressman John Faso, a member of the House Budget Committee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Arthelma. Great to be with you today.
Absolutely. Now, Congressman, I understand that one issue you have is using the Trump Care legislation to strip funding from Planned Parenthood, saying that it's a gigantic political trap. What do you mean by that?
Well, really what I was saying is that that provision, in my view, shouldn't be in a health insurance bill. We're trying to reform the health insurance markets, preserve the things in Obamacare that work, like keeping people on plans with their parents' health care, or preserving the ability of people with pre-existing conditions to purchase health care, but also fix what doesn't work in the ACA. And what doesn't work is the insurance regulatory system, which has raised costs and premiums and deductibles for families all across our country. And so we've got to have a balanced approach, and we also have to have a reasonable transition. And remember, the Obamacare law took about 3 years for them to put into place. It is very difficult to unravel this and change it overnight. In fact, it's impossible. Health plans are now coming up with their premiums and their programs for 2018 right now. So you've got to give them a period of time to transition, and the system that we're hopefully will be enacting will be one that will encourage employment, because the ACA has discouraged employment, and will also rectify the imbalance for people who don't have employer-provided health care by giving them reasonably sized tax credits, refundable advanced tax credits, so they can purchase health care that's good for themselves and their family.
I mean, it all sounds reasonable what you laid out there for us, Congressman. Wondering, do you feel that enough of what you just said is in the current current version of Trump Care, and might you vote on it as it is now?
I think this is a great first step. There are things that have to be done at HHS by Secretary Price through the regulation. And also, we're going to have to do legislation further to reform the health care system, and that is going to require us to win Democratic support. And I do think that we're better off if we have a bipartisan approach that people can understand and all sides can agree and compromise on. That was one of the big mistakes that President Obama and the Democrats made back in 2010 when they passed this thing with no Republican support. So I don't think we want to go down that path again, but it's important for us to act soon, because we've got to get this ball rolling. We've got to move so that the health plans can properly approach the 2018-19 term years for premiums, so that people have time to adjust to the changes that are occurring. But it's critical. It's critical for small businesses and individuals in the individual market that they have time to prepare and time for those insurance programs to come forth. That's why these refundable advanceable tax credits are so critical. It's very important, and some of my friends on the Republican side seem to escape the fact that the biggest subsidy right now for health insurance is the subsidy for employer-provided health insurance. That's a subsidy of about $350 billion a year through the tax code. But people, if they're self-employed or their employer doesn't provide insurance, those people are really left out of any kind of subsidy through the tax code. And that's why the advanced refundable tax credits that we're proposing in this approach really do work for many, many millions of people who haven't gotten the kind of care they needed through the ACA.
And do those tax refunds, Congressman, work for? Some are criticizing that particular plan, part of the plan, as it would benefit those who have a lot of money already, and those are the ones who least need assistance.
In actuality, again, we're talking about people who would get that advanced refundable tax credit if they do not have employer-provided health care or they're self-employed. So those tax credits phase out at $75,000 for an individual, $150,000 for a family. Now, there always can be adjustments along the way, but I would hate to see Republicans fight this battle among themselves and looking for perfection. The perfect shouldn't be the enemy of the good here. We need to reform the ACA. We need to fix what doesn't work and repeal what doesn't work and preserve what does work.
Congressman, jumping in there, I don't know that I got a clear answer from you on whether, as it stands now, that you would vote for Trump Care.
Well, I still have a couple of other questions as to how we're going to provide for the long-term, the losses for people that have pre-existing conditions, and to make sure that the funds that are set up through this, through the states, will be sufficient to pay for people that have extraordinary health care costs. Because that's one thing I think every American, no matter what their political philosophy, would not want to see families bankrupted by extraordinary health care costs. And that's something that I'm still working on and diving into the numbers to make sure that it's going to be sufficient. But the plan, the way it's set out, is headed in the right direction, and it's important that we have a plan that's patient-centered, but also a plan that does not discourage employment. And that's what happens with the ACA. If you get to that income cliff, you drop off and you lose a lot of benefits. And that is actually encouraged full-time work, it's discouraged full-time work, and it's discouraged people from trying to improve their financial situation because they're afraid of losing the health care benefit. The refundable tax credit will be helpful to them.
This week, the Congressional Budget Office, among other findings, will release a price tag for Trump Care. How much is too much for the cost of the federal government to fund it?
Well, it should cost less, and that's one of the things as a member of the House Budget Committee I want to see. I want to see that CBO analysis. But remember, Medicaid is on track to cost us over $1 trillion a year within a few years. And in fact, the federal deficit is on track to go from $19 trillion to $29 trillion within 10 years. So that's why it's vital that we get control of the costs and reform Medicaid, but also we've got to make sure that our kids and grandchildren aren't bankrupted in this country because Washington hasn't been able to control its spending.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why I think I got sent to Washington.
I'm sorry, they're making me hurry up here, and I wanted to squeeze this in because you mentioned how you wanted to make sure that you pointed out how Medicaid would basically, it's on the road to bankrupting the system. You have a lot of people on the other side of the aisle, of course, very concerned about folks who really depend on Medicaid. How do you
Right.
smooth it all out?
Well, the reforms that are being suggested, which would phase in changes, give the states more authority, and allow the states more flexibility in the design of their Medicaid systems, I think that's critical to controlling costs. You know, when you're spending someone else's money, it's no secret that costs seem to go out the window.
Yeah.
And so we've got to give the states more responsibility to control costs and design programs that work for them and for the poor in their states.
Okay, Congressman John Faso, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again.
Thank you very much.